Dravenmore woke that morning under a fall of gold petals. Every street leading to the memorial temple had been swept clean and lined with flowers the color of an old crown, laid down in honor of a woman the kingdom still called Queen Mother, 7 years after her death. Noble houses walked the temple steps in slow procession, laying wreaths at the feet of her statue, reciting speeches about mercy, about royal blood, about the purity of a line that had supposedly given the world nothing but grace. Alpha King Kael Draven did not walk among them in royal dress. He had traded his crown for a plain gray cloak and stepped into the crowd as an ordinary man, wanting, just once, to grieve his own mother the way any son might, without a throne beneath him and without a court watching his face for signs of weakness. As part of the memorial custom, the royal house distributed small silver coins to the gathered crowd, tokens meant to be pressed once against the temple stone and kept as remembrance. Kael took one from the memorial purse, without a second thought, the way a man takes any small thing handed to him in a crowd. He did not know that among the first 12 of those coins, filings taken from the crown's most recent repair had been quietly folded into the silver, tiny fragments left over from careful restoration work. Never the whole crown itself, only a trace of it. Near the temple steps, a girl of about 8 years crouched at the edge of the gathered nobles. Her clothes were patched and gray with street dust, her hands stained from a life spent surviving rather than kneeling in silk. A guard's arm shoved her back before she could take another step. "Get off the steps," he said. "You'll shame the Queen Mother's memory with those hands." The girl did not argue. She did not beg. She only looked at a single golden flower that had been trampled underfoot by a noble too busy reciting his speech to notice, and she bent to lift it, brushing the dirt from its petals before laying it gently at the base of the statue. Kael watched this from the crowd, and something in his chest ached in a way he did not examine closely. He felt pity for her, the distant kind, the kind that costs a man nothing to feel. He did not ask her name. He did not ask why guards were permitted to drive children away from a memorial meant to honor mercy. He did not ask why a day built to celebrate kindness needed a line of spears to keep the poor outside its borders. He simply reached into his pocket and threw her the coin. The girl, whose name was Nia, caught it out of habit more than hope. The moment her fingers closed around the silver, it grew warm in her palm, and then began to melt. Not like metal, but like frost under morning sun. From beneath the dissolving shell, a small fragment crystallized, glowing faintly, shaped like a single laurel leaf. The statue of Queen Mother trembled, so slightly that only those standing closest noticed it at all. Inside Kael, his wolf spirit, Riven rose with a growl that came from somewhere far older than the temple itself. "Not heir," Riven said. "Kin." The square fell silent. The kind of silence that follows an event no one present has language ready for. A guard was the first to break it, shouting that the beggar child had stolen a royal relic. Lady Seraphine, who had organized every detail of the ceremony, moved quickly toward the girl, speaking of safety and recovery, though her hands reached for the fragment with far more urgency than her voice suggested. Nia did not wait to hear the rest. She closed her fist around the glowing shard and ran. She ran the way street children learn to run before they learn much else, weaving through legs and skirts and startled nobles, out past the temple gates, down toward the stone bridge, where a handful of other children like her had built something close to a home out of driftwood and old canvas. She did not want to be found. In her short life, every time someone with power had taken an interest in her, it had ended badly. She saw no reason today would be different. Guard Captain Orlan, acting on the accusation shouted behind him, followed the trail toward the bridge, working under orders to recover a stolen relic by any means necessary. He found instead a girl named Talia, 11 years old, sharp-eyed and quick enough with words to buy her friend a few extra seconds to disappear. Talia lied about where Nia had gone. For that, she was seized instead, dragged back toward the temple as a substitute for the child the guards had actually been sent to catch. The fault for that did not belong to two frightened children. It belonged to an order that treated poverty as a crime to be chased down with spears. Word reached Nia within the hour that her friend had been taken in her place. She sat with the fragment clutched in one hand, the trampled golden flower still in the other, and remembered every small kindness Talia had ever done for her, sharing bread when there wasn't enough, keeping watch so Nia could sleep first. Fear told her to keep running. Something stronger told her to turn back. Meanwhile, Cacale stood frozen at the temple steps, staring at the space where a beggar girl had vanished into the crowd, carrying a piece of his mother's crown. He understood with a clarity that came far too late exactly what he had done. "I gave her a coin," he said quietly, "to no one in particular, because it was easier than asking why my mother's blood was begging at my mother's shrine." When guards finally cornered Nia near the old bridge and reached to tear the fragment from her hands, Riven surged forward in spirit, placing himself, unseen by most, between the child and the men closing in on her. Cale arrived moments later, cutting through the guards with a single command. "She does not go to a cell," he said. "She goes to the shrine chamber with the other girl and with witnesses." Inside the shrine chamber, away from spears and shouting nobles, Cale did something he had not done on the temple steps. He knelt down until he was level with Nia's eyes, instead of standing above her, and asked if she had been hurt before he asked anything at all about the glowing fragment in her hand. Talia, brought in alongside her, confirmed something the guards had missed entirely in their rush to call it theft. Nia had worn a small woven ribbon around her wrist, for as long as Talia had known her, long before any coin had ever touched her palm. The ribbon bore half of an embroidered laurel symbol, a faded nursery code stitched into its edge, and a pattern of thread that an old nurse named Myra, summoned to the chamber, recognized instantly. "That stitch belongs to the royal nursery," Myra said. "I have not seen work like it in 27 years. Talia produced one more thing, a worn scrap of paper Nia's mother had left behind before she died the previous winter. On it, in faded ink, was a name half-written and hard to read, and a single line of instruction. "Do not sing the second verse before marble walls." Something in Cale went still when he heard those words read aloud. He asked Nia gently if she knew any lullaby, any song her mother might have sung to her as a child. Nia hesitated, then sang a few uncertain lines, her voice small in the wide stone chamber. Myra's breath caught halfway through the second verse. "That is not a morning song," she whispered. "That is the lullaby the Queen Mother sang to her own children, and only her own children, when they could not sleep." Cale felt the melody settle into a place in his memory he had never questioned before. A fragment of childhood, he had always been told, belonged to grief for a sister who died as an infant, a sister whose loss he had never been permitted to remember clearly. He realized, in that moment, that his memory had not been wrong, only mislabeled. Marek, keeper of the old royal mint, was brought in to explain what the coin itself had actually been. "The crown was never melted down," he said. "It was buried whole with the Queen Mother, exactly as the records claim. But during its final repair years ago, small filings were taken and quietly folded into the first 12 mourning coins issued for ceremonies like this one. By old memorial custom, only the first 12 coins struck each year carried that trace, so that the royal dead would be symbolically remembered among the common people who would never be allowed to touch the crown itself. The silver shell dissolves only when it meets someone of the Queen Mother's direct bloodline," he said. "It does not recreate the crown from nothing. It only remembers a fragment of what it once was." The coin the king carried that day had come from the same memorial purse as the others, verified against the mint's own ledger, beyond any question of forgery. With the coin's mystery explained, attention turned to a deeper and more dangerous question. Who was Nia, truly, and how had a piece of royal bloodline ended up begging on temple steps? A royal scribe searching the memorial archives found what should have been an entire page devoted to a lost princess named Elowyn, sister to Cale, missing from the official record. Lady Seraphine, when pressed, admitted she had noticed the inconsistency 3 years earlier, during a routine audit of the memorial records, back when she had only just been named junior curator of the archive. She had not known then that Elowen was alive, only that a single page did not match the formalities every other royal death had received. "I chose not to investigate," she said. "The memorial required unity, not old scandal." What the sealed archive finally revealed was a truth far older and far crueler than a simple accident of history. 27 years earlier, a purge had moved quietly through the succession lines of the royal family, aimed at eliminating any branch that might one day challenge the throne's central line. The Queen Mother discovered the plot too late to stop it entirely, but not too late to save her own daughter. She staged Elowen's death as illness, and gave the infant to a trusted nurse to be raised far from the palace. She hid what truth she could inside a lullaby only her own children would recognize, and a nursery ribbon stitched with a mark that could never be fully unpicked. The fragment locked within the shrine she left to the old memorial custom itself, trusting that if her bloodline ever came home, the crown's own tradition would know it before any council could find a reason to deny it. Elowen grew up outside the palace walls, never knowing the danger she had been born into. She became Naya's mother herself years later and died the previous winter, leaving her child only a ribbon, a lullaby, and a name too dangerous to speak clearly. Kael had been very young when Elowen vanished from his life. He remembered only fragments, a white cradle, his mother's voice singing something soft in the dark, a verse he had been taught, later, to think of only as an old song of mourning. He had not been wrong to remember it. He had only been taught to misunderstand it. Lord Varric's involvement in all of this was not accidental, though it did not begin with him. 27 years earlier, when the purge moved through the succession lines, Varric had been little more than a junior clerk in his father's service. He had not given that order, and he had not carried it out. But when his father died, Varric inherited both his council seat and the sealed file that came with it, along with a single standing instruction passed down like an heirloom. This secret does not surface, whatever the cost of keeping it buried. He had kept that instruction for years without ever expecting to be tested on it. A memorial census organized under Seraphine's office had, days before the ceremony, noted a street child seen frequently near the shrine, wearing an unusual ribbon. That report reached Varric's desk. He opened the sealed Elowen file quietly, cross-checked it against the mint ledger for the mourning coins, and prepared a covert transfer order in case his suspicions proved correct. He was not certain Naya was Elowen's descendant. He understood the possibility alone was dangerous enough to prepare for. A lost princess is a tragedy, Varric said, once confronted with the evidence gathering against him. A living branch is a succession crisis. He did not deny wanting Nia removed. He denied only that removal meant harm, insisting instead that a protective transfer order had been issued purely for her safety, given the unrest her sudden appearance had caused. While Kael had remained in the archive, deep in the purge records with Talia and the royal scribe, Varric had forged an emergency protective transfer authorization under a council seal he still held from his father's time, and sent it to the shrine chamber before anyone thought to question where it had truly come from. Orlan, assigned to escort the carriage prepared for that transfer, noticed something the paperwork had not accounted for. The sealed route did not lead toward the royal nursery, or the infirmary, or anywhere resembling protective care. It led toward the old execution gate at the edge of the outer wall, a place where so-called relic thieves had quietly disappeared in years past, never seen again. The gate clerk on duty later confirmed, under oath, that the route seal matched a private cipher used only in Varric's own correspondence, one the council had never authorized for use on a child. Orlan turned the carriage around before it reached the gate, bringing both girls back to the shrine chamber instead, and standing before the court afterward as a direct witness that the custody order had been dressed in the language of safety while serving an entirely different purpose. Seraphine, for her part, proposed a softer version of erasure. Once she understood the girl could not simply be denied. Let her be known as a child blessed by the Queen Mother's memory, she suggested. A symbol of charity, nothing more. No bloodline claim, no complications for the succession. Nia, listening to adults debate her future, as though she were not standing in the room, finally spoke for herself. I don't know how to be a princess, she said. I only know Talia got arrested because I ran. The formal hearing was held before the full court, beneath the shrine's inner chamber, where the crown's remaining fragment had rested undisturbed since the Queen Mother's burial. Every piece of proof was placed before the court in turn, each carrying its own separate weight. The crown seed fragment, freed from its silver shell. The birth ribbon, its nursery thread and half-laurel symbol, confirmed by Myra. The guardian's note, in a dead woman's failing handwriting. The lullaby, sung by a child who had no reason to know its origin. The mint ledger, proving the coin's authenticity beyond doubt. The missing memorial page, its absence never properly explained. The sealed purge archive, confirming a mother's desperate choice to save her daughter's life. And the transfer order, exposed as a custody arrangement, built to end quietly at an execution gate. When the fragment was returned to the shrine and pressed once more against the crown's remaining core, the stone did not glow with the language of succession. It answered only with a name. Nia, it seemed to whisper through the light itself. Of Elowen's line, child restored. Varric argued, even then, that recognizing the girl publicly would destabilize alliances built on the assumption that Kael's line stood alone and unchallenged. Kael's answer left no room for further debate. A throne that survives by killing children of its own blood, he said, does not deserve to call itself stable. Varric was arrested that same hour, charged with concealing a purge he had not ordered but had chosen for years to protect, and with forging a transfer order meant to end in execution rather than protection. Seraphine was suspended from the memorial office and placed under formal inquiry for burying an inconsistency she had noticed years before, rather than risking the discomfort of the truth. Kael did not claim Nia as his sole ward, or fold her quietly into palace life as a private matter. He established instead a shared guardianship, with Mera overseeing her health and welfare, an independent magistrate safeguarding her legal standing, and Talia's small circle of street friends, welcome to remain close if that was what Nia wanted. He named himself only her protector, never her owner. Any papers her mother had left behind were formally entered into her guardian file, so that her origins would never again depend on a single person's memory or convenience. Beyond Nia's case alone, Kael issued orders meant to answer a wound far larger than one child's story. Guards were forbidden from driving children away from public shrines and memorials, on pain of formal discipline. The old child registry, long neglected, was fully restored. An inquiry was opened into missing and unregistered children across the kingdom, a wound the crown had allowed to fester in silence for years. A new house was established, in the Queen Mother's name, not as a locked institution, but as a place with open doors, offering food, medical care, education, and access to legal guardians for any child who needed it, managed by an independent board answerable to no single noble office. Some days later, Kael returned to the temple steps where it had all begun. He found Nia there again, standing near the statue that had once trembled at her touch. This time, he did not throw her anything from a distance. He knelt down until his eyes met hers, the way he should have done from the very beginning. "What is your name?" he asked. "Nia," she answered. "Then that," Kael said, "is the first thing the crown will protect." He made it plain before the full court and anyone who might later argue otherwise, that no one would use Nia as a bargaining piece for marriage pacts or succession claims while she remained a child. Elowen's line had been given back its name, but the girl herself would not be turned into a political tool to serve it. Any decisions about her future, he declared, would require her guardian's counsel and her own consent once she was old enough to give it. Nia knelt at the base of the statue one last time and placed the same trampled golden flower gently into the stone hand of the Queen Mother she had never known was her own grandmother. Kael stood behind her, not above her on some raised platform, simply present, the way any family member might stand near a child at a quiet moment. Riven lay at the foot of the temple steps, no longer a shadow of royal threat, but something closer to a guardian, resting between street children and the guards who had once been ordered to chase them away. Light from the restored crown seemed to fall gently across every corner of that square, reaching even the places where children like Nia had once been told they did not belong. Kael had thrown her silver. Nia had given back a name the crown had spent years trying to forget.